Good afternoon. Coming to you with another wargaming video. This one isn't an unboxing, unpacking, unenveloping. This is a playtest report. And as you may know that my friend Alan Snyder in Thailand, he and I have been playtesting games for Mark Simonitch and GMT Games, specifically his 40-something series. We did the second edition of France 40 and then Italy 43, which is going over very well. We had a lot of fun with both of them, and both of them are rather replayable, surprisingly so for the Italy game, since it's such a, I don't want to say a static situation, but it's rough going through mountains and across rivers. It's basically the approach to Monte Cassino. So we play tested that, had fun with it, and now we're doing another one for Mark. This one's a little different. It's not from the 40-something series. It is Koniggratz 66. Koniggratz, also known as the Battle of Sadowa, was the decisive Prussian defeat of the Austrians in present-day Czech Republic, Czechia, in 1866 during the 6 Weeks' War. And it was instrumental towards uniting Germany and driving Austrian influence out of what would be the future German Empire. It was a war engineered by Bismarck, actually fought under Helmut von Moltke, the creator of the Prussian General Staff. And it was a triumph of Prussian modernity over the polyglot and sometimes disconnected army of the Hapsburgs. Mark's take on this is different than mine. I did the Sadowa campaign for Turning Point Simulations as a strategic level treatment of the entire campaign in Bohemia. Mark's focus is as a grand tactical game on the Battle of Koniggratz, or Sadowa, if you will, through one day. So he's taking his basic approach and narrowing it down to a single battle rather than the full campaign as he has in the 40-something series. But still, you'll see some concepts that are consistent. For example, tactical movement, that a unit can move across any terrain that's not impassable, either 1 or 2 hexes, without expending movement points. It's a great way to simplify things, and for short distances, players aren't adding up movement points and asking themselves all the time, can I do this, can I do that? Well, basic answer is, unless you've got something impassable between you and your destination, yeah, you can. It's also more involved in some ways. You have a combination of combat types. You have fire and you have assault. Assault is basically fixed bayonets and charge. And that's a little riskier, especially against well-formed units that have all their firepower. The other type is fire, and this is the one that actually decides the battle for the most part. And there are plenty of chances to exercise this. There's the phasing player gets to do fire right away. It's almost like prep fire in advanced squad leader, but you have one combat phase. Then you can move. Then the defender gets a chance to fire back. And then any units that survive in good order can assault or execute fire combat. The second combat phase has its limits, though. Artillery can move beforehand, but they can't shoot in the second combat phase. This is really important. Also, the Austrians are bound by a doctrine that when they move into an enemy zone of control, they have to assault. And sometimes this can amount to a big win with the bayonet or using the butt end of the musket, or it can result in close order suicide, a term I've used in previous articles and things. But assault is a gamble. And there are times that it's a good idea, and sometimes that the system forces the player, especially the Austrian, to do it. Now, there are a couple of things that make this game unusual. It's not just the rather involved, complex sequence of play, much more complex than in the 40-something games. For one thing, there are plenty of opportunities for friction. Using the theories of Karl von Clausewitz, who was a major influence on Moltke and the Prussian army, that there's a chaos phase. In fact, there are a couple of them during each player turn where you can randomly draw chits for the other guy's formations, and then you roll the die to see, or 2 dice, to see what affects them. Usually, it's no effect if these units are within command range of their appropriate leader, that he can exercise control and minimize the friction. Sometimes you get it on a really low die roll. Most of the time you don't. Most of the time these die rolls will affect a unit that is out of command. And if any of them are, they're eligible. If not, you can ignore the die roll. Now, if you have a unit that's out of command or is allowed to be affected by a low die roll, usually it's an infantry or cavalry unit that the player can choose, not the owning player, the opponent. And it either loses a morale step, good order goes to disordered, disordered goes to broken, broken goes to rout, which is the same thing with the possibility of a step loss. That's one option. The other one is that you can just move it 2 hexes, do tactical movement as long as it doesn't go into an enemy zone of control. You just can't pick up an enemy unit and say, okay, go attack my 5 units over there and kill yourselves. No, can't do that. But it can still be useful. One thing about this, too, is that you end up getting a fair amount of randomness in the course of the game, and not just in combat die rolls. That you could have units that suddenly can't work. You have units that have to get out of the way. Most of the time, like I said, it's infantry and cavalry. In rare cases, it can also be artillery. Now, artillery is the arm of decision in this game. It's very unusual. Most of the time, like if you see a contemporary battle, say the American Civil War, it's decided by infantry. It's the artillery that does the job. If you treat it as an infantry and cavalry battle, you will get your butt kicked, most probably, as I did playing the Prussians in our first playthrough. It gets frustrating. What you have to do is use your artillery to break up units, get them into attrite them, if you will, push them back, and then use the infantry to follow up. And secondly, use your infantry to protect those guns. I don't recall ever seeing a tactical or grand tactical game in which the artillery is this important. The closest I can think of, not with artillery, is the SPI 1914 game, the first campaigns in World War I, where German machine guns basically mow everybody down. And the whole question is, in what order? How do they use their guns? Can they get them up? But the infantry can sit back, protect those guns, and clean up the mess afterwards, shoot the cripples, if you will. Koniggratz 66 is kind of similar in that way. Only no machine guns. It's the artillery that does the job. Now, this is, historically, it was a great Prussian victory. In the game, if you just use the traditional Prussian attacks, Prussian doctrine, as Robert Citino points out. His basic thesis in his works is that the Prussians were always very inventive, took the initiative, ready to attack, and more likely to ask, where is the enemy, not how strong is he? If you do this and you're a Prussian, you will get massacred. Don't do it. Be a little more careful. Use those guns, but the Prussian guns are definitely inferior to the Austrians. The Austrians had far better artillery, much more of it, and and it was more modern, and it can take a toll, especially since the Austrians are on the defensive. Disadvantage of guns is that artillery, like cavalry, does not benefit from defensible terrain, except for pre-positioned, pre-built artillery redoubts, which only the Austrian has. That they can stack with infantry in a town or woods or castle and get benefits, but they can't do it by themselves. Because, let's just figure, the artillery is going to be positioned on the edge of that feature. They're not going to be up on second-story windows. They need infantry for that. So, almost every sort of terrain is clear terrain with all the defensive detriments for artillery. And the same goes, too, for cavalry. Guys don't get off their horses and climb up to those upper floor windows. And this makes a lot of sense. It takes a little getting used to, but it makes a huge amount of sense. And it goes to that idea that the infantry has to support and protect the artillery. Now, the Austrians have that huge advantage in artillery. The Prussians have it in infantry. The Austrians are still using muzzle-loading rifled muskets. Fine for the Civil War, but this is a year later. The Prussians used the Dreyse needle gun, the first operational bolt-action rifle. And it gives them a higher rate of fire in practice, greater range, a lot more options, including the option to fire from a prone position, which means that they make smaller targets. They don't have to be standing out there in their fancy blue uniforms waiting to get shot. Not like the American Civil War until the very end. They can use cover better. They can use concealment. They can get close to the ground, more like a modern infantryman. In historical terms, the Dreyse gun was not a miracle weapon. The needle that acted as a firing pin tended to break. It wasn't as reliable as it could have been, but it's still a generation better than what the Austrians had. And in the game, this gives the Prussians an advantage that they might struggle to take full advantage of, but if they can, it can be important because they get a die roll, they get a beneficial dice roll modifier. It's a -2. And this counteracts all defensible terrain on the map. It neutralizes woods, it neutralizes towns and villages. This is like firing at units in clear terrain. Now, if they're in clear terrain, they're even better targets. So, if the Prussians can get up close and personal with their infantry, the thing to do is to use fire instead of the bayonet. Use the bayonet and use cavalry charges basically to seal the deal, chase the broken units, and really run up the score. Cavalry is probably the least useful of the three. Cavalry tops, infantry second, cavalry third. So this is really a gun bunnies battle, not one for the infantry or the cavalry, and it has to be treated as such. Now, here too, I should point out that There are very involved rules involving reserves. The Austrians have most of them, and they're slow to commit. Unless Benedict goes running up within 3 hexes of the army level artillery reserve, they stay in place. They can't move. They can't do anything. Or if the Prussians get close, perhaps they can. You also have corps and divisions that are in reserve, and they are released by the proximity of Prussian units. Within 5 hexes, it's automatic. When it's 6 to 10, then you roll on it. The further out, the less likely they are to commit to battle. So this takes a big chunk of the Austrian army out of the battle. On the Prussian side, they have basically 2 divisions sitting in reserve until 2 of the Austrian reserves are released. Until a certain point of the game, then they can move freely. Now, whereas the Austrians in reserve are basically immobilized, the Prussians just can't move east of the Bistritz River. They cannot close with the Austrians. But if there are any Austrians on the west bank of the Bistritz, they're fair game. Also, Prussian artillery with the reserves can move right up to the river and engage the Austrians. And they just don't cross until they're activated. So this is some of the soft command elements, if you will, in the game. Another one is the idea of collapse. Units can be broken, they can be disrupted, they can be routed. Usually what you see in a game is that they do this by themselves. The whole formation of multiple units might be affected when you have a certain amount of them that have their morale and cohesion degraded. In Koniggratz 66, slightly different. It deals with clusters. A cluster is 3 or more contiguous hexes that have one's own units in them, and they are at some lowered state of morale, disrupted, broken, or routed. If they're all connected there, you got a cluster. Then you roll on it. The more units that there are in the cluster, the greater the chances of it collapsing. The more hexes, the greater the chances. When it collapses, every unit loses another step in its cohesion. So the broken units rout, the disordered ones become broken, and the routed ones, they rout again, which makes them prime targets for one's non-artillery. It could be a big one for cavalry. It's a chance for them to exploit the cavalry charge rules, because units that are disordered have their defense strengths halved. Units that are broken or routed have a defense strength of 0, but you move next to them, they rout again, and with the chance of losing a step in strength. And this can go on ad infinitum. Now, this is a place where fear and disorder become contagious. And maybe players should be looking at opportunities to disorder or break units in a continuous line or a bunch, a cluster, instead of just picking off units throughout the line. Concentrate fire, concentrate assaults if you have the chance, and also those chaos rules to create clusters and increase the chance that the whole bunch of them will take off. That's important. But still, no matter what, I keep on coming back to the artillery. Artillery is going to be vital for this. Artillery is vital for everything, not just routing infantry and chasing off and destroying cavalry, but counter battery fire. Now, with stronger units for the most part and longer range, the Austrians have their advantage here. No doubt about it. The Prussians are remembered as the superior army. The Austrians as a bunch of Germans, Poles, Hungarians, Croatians, Italians, Ukrainians, everybody and his dog all speaking a different language. But in this game, it doesn't translate into total weakness. They're stronger than people might remember them. They're stronger than they're mostly represented in World War I games. You could even say that this was the Austrian army at the peak of its powers. And yes, they can win. This is not a preordained victory for Bismarck and Wilhelm I and Moltke and Rhone. There are no foregone conclusions here. If you get stuck playing the Austrian, you're not stuck. You have a chance to win. You have a very good chance to win based on your artillery especially. So those are my impressions of probably a couple months of playing this game. In the space of 2 hours, we usually get a player turn and a half in. Now we're getting a little more in since we know the rules better. You have to keep track of the turn sequence very carefully. There is a track for that, thankfully. And it is a little more involved, I'd say, than the 40-something games. Still, this is really good. And even though I'm a playtester, I did pre-order it. I'm not going to get sick of this game. So, if you want to see graphics, if you want to see more details, go to the GMT Games website and look it up. Based on my playtesting, I can endorse this thing. It's different. It's not what you would expect with the artillery-heavy decisions, but I think it's a cool game. And from what I can tell, decent history. So, that's the end of my wargaming video for January 23rd, 2026. Please feel free to subscribe, like, comment, and share with your friends, share with strangers, share with the neighbors, share with your neighbor's dog. But please feel free to get this video and all the other ones I do out there. I'm not doing this in isolation. I don't want it to be an audience of one, maybe two. Basically, my girlfriend and my mom. So get this out, share it with people, discuss it, and I will see you soon. Thank you as always for your time, and I'll see you down the road.